What are we doing?
We're here at Winnemucca, Nevada at the event center watching monster trucks.
Yep. Big tires, tube chassis, and blown big blocks. That's what we're all about, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey folks, I'm back. I got a little bit of a late start on the video this week. I've already been off for a couple of days, but that means head gaskets are done. I got that all tore apart, found the failure with the head gasket that was letting coolant into cylinder number 1. Even though I found the failure point, I'm still a little bit up in the air of what the root cause was on that. I'll show that a little bit on the video here in a little bit, and maybe you guys can offer your opinion on it. Either way, this thing's all reassembled, everything's all put back together, rocker arm's set. I did slow the blower down to 20% overdriven instead of 25%. Took a little bit of timing out of it, just to try and give these head gaskets a fighting chance. I may even slow the blower down a little bit more before we get too rowdy with it. But so far, this thing sounds amazing. It's just, always makes me happy to fire this thing up. Anyway, I'll flip this thing around and show you what I found when I pulled that driver's side head off. So here's the driver's side head gasket. And as soon as I lifted that head off, this stuck out like a sore thumb. Immediately caught my attention. So you can see this steel shim gasket has been puffed out like a balloon. So obviously it was leaking compression between these two layers of this gasket. And it has nowhere to go. That's a cooling port. That shape is a cooling port in the bottom of the head. So as it leaked compression past the fire ring here, puffed this up like a balloon, and then sucked the edge of this bore in. I mean, that material's got to come from somewhere. As you can see, it's distorted and no longer round. And it also, you can see a crack here and here where it cracked through the fire ring. So once it blew this out, I was probably getting air in the cooling system, like a lot of air in the cooling system. And those cracks through the fire ring obviously is where I was getting coolant in number 1 cylinder. So there's the major failure. Obviously that's that problem. Now the root of the problem, to me, why is it leaking between those two layers? If you look here, you can see that it has leaked combustion past the fire rings into the cooling system back here as well. It just had somewhere to go, so it didn't puff this gasket up at that time. And you think maybe there was a low spot here, let air in here and created this issue. Both the block and the heads have been decked on a machine that is designed to make things flat. So obviously the heads and the block are flat. I've checked the flatness here with 1/1000 feeler gauge and a 1-2-3 block, and you can't fit it in there. You can't drag it out if you put any pressure on it. It's pretty stinking flat. And then this area here, I'm pretty sure that either the head or the block don't go like this. Now if you look on the passenger side, there's no failures on this area here like the other gasket. If you pull that layer off, you can see it had the same issue with leaking combustion past that fire ring in a couple of holes. And also, if you look in this area, you can see, maybe you can see, that this gasket is distorted. And it's not pressure, because there's a hole there and through the end of the cooling system. That's just from torquing the head gasket. It's distorted this shim in several locations. So I'm not really sure if there's an issue with this material that these are made out of. Maybe I'm just exceeding the limits of a MLS Cometic gasket. Maybe I need to go to O-rings and copper like the big boost guys do. I'm really not sure. For now, I've installed a new set of MLS Cometic gaskets. They're a little bit thicker. These were custom gaskets from Cometic. The ones I have now are off-the-shelf gaskets. Maybe there's a difference there. I'm not really sure. For now, we're gonna slow the blower down, take a little bit of timing away, and I'm not sure that's a bad thing, because right now, like I said, this thing sounds amazing. It sounds better than it ever has. Maybe, and all I've done is slow the blower down and take 5 degrees of timing away from it. Maybe it's something as simple as a bad tune-up. I don't know. But I'm glad the engine is reassembled. Everything looks good. I think it's time to put some bedsides on this thing. Looking pretty sharp with a little bit of color on there. Now most of the bed mounting and everything was done long before any paint was finished. Actually way before it was disassembled for powder coat or anything. I haven't actually seen this thing with the bedsides on it since before I built the headers. I think maybe 2 years ago. So now to finish it, you can see there's some miscellaneous rods and whatnot to hold this thing in place. Like that diagonal rod right there is an adjustable rod. It's basically just a link with rod ends in each end of it, left and right hand thread. So I can adjust that rod to make your body lines line up where they need to be. That tube there plunges in and out of the engine cage. Now this rod down here, I made it adjustable, but I don't think it needs to be. And actually it's kind of a hindrance because that rod end right there is bolted to a very flimsy piece of tin. So it's not very rigid. As the tin kind of flexes, the ball and the rod end rolls around. I just don't like how that works. So what I'm gonna do is build a couple of pieces like this here. That is no adjustment, just a piece of tube that the ends are stamped flat. Now to do that, I have a tool that I built. So this is basically just a die that you're going to use in the press. You can see there's a hole for 1/2 inch diameter and 3/8 diameter. So I can crimp the ends on both those sizes of tubing. See here, they're just slots. So that's the relief of where the tube material goes once it's pressed into place. And that's what it looks like inside. Both halves are the same. You just lay your tube in place like so. Set the other half on top of it. And just press on whichever side you need to do. And you end up with a nice uniform crimp on the end of them tubes, flat area, so you can drill a hole and bolt it up to something. Turns out pretty clean. I've built several of them on here, and it looks like I need about 6 more to get these bedsides as rigid as I would like them. So I'll head out to the press with my tool and some tube, and we'll build a couple more supports. Here I've got this die set in the press. Get everything close and in place. There's nothing scientific about using this thing. It's all just about eyeballing it and feel. I'm basically just lining the end of the tube up flush with the end of the die back here in the back. And then I'm just line of sight down just kind of visually looking down the tube, down the die, kind of keeping everything in line. Once I put pressure on it with the die, with the press, it holds it in shape, and we just smash it down into the shape we're looking for. Give her a couple extra pumps, go about 17 ton on the press. Probably doesn't need that much, but doesn't seem to hurt. There it is. Pretty clean. Now doing this side, I have to line it up with the end of the die with my finger back here, line of sight, make sure I'm centered up in the machinings on the die, and I have to look at my flat end because I want my flats oriented both on the same plane. I want them in line with each other. It should be pretty close. That'll do. I've considered adding a punch to my die out there, so once you were finished, you know, crimping these ends and making your flat area, you could actually continue to push on it and stamp a hole through there. But I like having the option to place that hole anywhere in this flat. If I actually had a punch integrated into that die, I would be, you know, stuck with whatever that measurement ended up being. As it is now, I just set them up in the Bridgeport, drill whatever diameter hole I need. I mean, I can put a 3/8 bolt in there, 5/16, 1/4 inch, whatever I want. Radius the corners a little bit, and they look pretty nice when they're all done. That's the next step for these, so I'll get after it. Now, I've got these rods changed out, and I was just going to show a little better as to why I took this adjustable link here out of holding that lower bed corner on. So if I have this bolted to that, you know, that thin piece of tin, as it tries to move in and out, it can flex this ball. You know, the tin piece that it's bolted to is not rigid enough to hold it straight. So it still allows it to flex because this can move. So now I have this bolted in place here, and you can see that link is not going to flex. It's a lot more rigid. I like the results of that a lot better. So I have 2 more I need to build. First one is, if you look, there's nothing to keep fore and aft movement on these bedsides. There's a little bit of web on this bracket, but it's still kind of flexible to go back and forth. And it's mostly relying on that tube up front there That's mostly what is keeping it from moving forward and back. And that's just not enough. You know, auger this thing in, kind of nosedive it into the ground. It might drive this bedside into the back of the cab. That's not going to be very good. So what I'm going to do is attach another tube support under here and go up to this clamp that's on the main chassis there. Give it a little bit of triangulation. Should rigid that up in that direction as well. And the last one, I don't know if I can get on camera, but this is kind of flexy. There's nothing in the middle of that thing in a long span. I had plans to do something here anyway. That bolt right there is drilled and tapped into the shock mount. I'm going to build a tube that comes off of that bolt, that position there, and comes to the bedside here. And for now, what I'm going to try to do is use one of those really strong magnets like I did on the corner of the hood to hold that in place. I think it'll be plenty enough to hold that from wiggling around. If you get something, you know, a pretty good whack to where it's got to pop loose from the magnet and slap back on, so be it. If it doesn't work out, then I can go back in. I'll just build a tab or a mount or something, and we can panel bond it to the end of the fender and bolt that tube to that. Mostly just trying it out and see how that works. Kind of doing the lazy guy way of cutting this tubing to length. Just using a regular little tubing cutter, cordless drill to spin it. Pretty short work of this. There's all the extra support rods whipped up, bolted in place. Really happy with how all that turned out. Especially the ones with the magnets on the end there. That really made the center of that bedside way more rigid. Finished them off with tail light lenses. Now it's time to take the family in and watch some monster trucks since they're in town. Definitely getting our share of blown alcohol this weekend. went to 2 days worth of monster trucks, which is all right. We only get to see them here locally once a year, so we just took advantage of that while they were down here. The guys that were driving the trucks did a great job. They put on a good show. The family really enjoyed it. I had a great time. And at the end of the day today, we actually had enough time before dark to take this thing down to the local historic landmark, the Golconda Schoolhouse, and get a couple of pictures of it in the fading sunlight just before it really got into sunset. Turned out pretty cool. Got a little bit of video of driving it around town. I'll post that stuff up now just to kind of finish off this video. I think the next episode, I'm going to tackle the interior door panels. So if you're interested in more CNC router table stuff and actually buck riveting, you know, laminating some aluminum together with buck rivets, you might keep your eye out for that next episode and check it out when I get it put up. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one. So what are we doing?
I don't remember.